What do an airplane, a bicycle, and the church all have in common? If any of them stop moving forward, they're in big trouble. Welcome to the Word for 2021. Today we're in Joshua chapter 4. The first generation that came out of Egypt was not willing to cross over. They weren't willing to follow God. They had heard that there were giants in the land, that there were walled, fortified cities, that there were enemies that they didn't think that they could face. So they wanted to go backward. This new generation, however, was willing to follow God. They were willing to take a risk, to trust God, even though they still had giants to face. They still had walled, fortified cities to overcome. They still had enemies to deal with. They were willing to follow God and not go back. In the Australian coat of arms, there are two animals that you will find there, the emu and the kangaroo. The emu has a three-toed foot. The kangaroo has a large tail. Neither one of them can go backwards easily. That's why the Australians wanted to put them on their seal, because they always wanted to give the impression that they were moving forward. In chapter 3 of Joshua, the Israelites, they had followed the ark. Wherever God went, they followed. They followed in faith. Even though the water was at flood stage, they listened to God and did what He said. They obeyed and they experienced a miracle. Now, in chapter 4, God is telling them to make a memorial. 12 men, one man from each of the 12 tribes, was to go back into the Jordan and take a large stone right where the Ark of the Covenant had been, put it on their shoulder, and bring it out. Then, where they were to stay that night, which would be Gilgal, they were to make a memorial. And whenever a child asked, "What do these stones mean?" they were to tell the story. They were to tell the story of how God had gone before them, how God was with them, and then how God came behind them. They were to tell the story that God was always there, that they were following His lead, that in the midst of the river, the Ark of the Covenant held the water back. And then when the last Hebrew foot came out of the Jordan, the water flowed once more back to flood stage. God had done a miracle for them. They were to tell the story so they might build faith into the following generations. We need to do the exact same thing. Tell the story of how good God has been our provider, how we have experienced God's presence, and how God has protected us. As we do, we too will build faith in the next generation to follow. As we're going into the future, it's unknown, it's uncharted. But what we read in chapters 3 and 4 is true for us today. That God has gone before us, that God is with us, and that God will follow us. He will never leave us or forsake us. Thank you for joining the Word for 2021.